Welcome to the first official episode of the Spot Burn podcast, brought to you by Musky Fool and hosted by
Josh, a.k.a. Bam Bam.
And you got Dan as well from Musky Fool. We wanted to start by thanking two awesome companies that came on board as our podcast sponsors. I don't know what they're thinking, but they came on board. We got Cortland Line Company. They make fly line. They make fishing line for conventional stuff. They're also kind of in the other musky state up in New York, pretty close to the St. Lawrence River. We've actually been working with Cortland. They're pretty awesome. They came out with a musky pike series a couple of years ago, and it's pretty rad. Absolutely. Josh and I are going to be fishing a little bit of it this year, see how it goes. Also, we got Stealth Craft Boats from Baldwin, Michigan. They probably make the most complete lineup of river boats on the market. I mean, they got everything. Hooligans.
I can't think of another company.
They got rafts, drift boats, jet boats, power drifters.
TVs.
TVs. They got TVs, stealth welds, aluminum. TVs.
Pontoons.
They have pontoons. I know I've seen a pontoon.
And some subs.
But no, we're really grateful for these guys. Josh and I have both been running a couple different stealth crafts. We love them. We're going to keep running them, keep crashing them. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about those. But seriously, huge thank you for believing in all this crap and coming on board. We're going to get into it with the first episode. We're really going to keep it simple and just introduce what we're up to. What the hell are we doing here? What have we gotten ourselves into, Josh?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an open-ended journey, folks. We came up with this idea a couple months ago to start this podcast. And we had all these ideas. A lot of folks were asking, when are you going to bring back the Musky Fool live content? So we thought, hey, let's start a podcast and have this forum to just take it wherever it leads us. And we have a bunch of guests that are kind of lined up and some ideas in the hopper. So it's going to be fun. And we're also looking from a lot of feedback from the viewers. So you can go to the website as well. There's a page there.
Muskyfool.com.
Muskyfool.com. There's a page there for the Spot Burn podcast. Let us know what you want us to cover. If you got any ideas, questions, etc., we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and I think both of us, we started working together a little bit ago, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, Josh has been behind the scenes, but he brings so much of Musky Fool to life. So this is just another version of that. You can see we're coming to you from a pretty cool space. It's actually the basement of the Musky Fool Fly Shop. This building was 1893, I believe. It's old, it's gross, but Josh made it pretty. We're calling it the dungeon.
The dungeon.
The dungeon. But yeah, man, I mean, Josh and I, we have a few things in common, but we come from different backgrounds. We both love muskies. We're both from Wisconsin. We both love building businesses, and we're both gonna do this crazy shit together, so we'll see how it goes.
It was a match made in Wisconsin.
Match made in Wisconsin over the worst fish ever invented. So we're gonna get into a little bit about who we are, why we're here, what the podcast is about. We're gonna try and keep it short and sweet, but we thought that was a good way to start things off. So how did we end up in this old, moist, nasty basement recording a podcast together? Where did it all? Whose stupid idea was this?
I'm not sure whose stupid idea it was. It was either Dan or Jen's idea.
All Jen's ideas are good ideas, so
let's blame it on her since she's not sitting in front of the camera right now.
She's responsible for the name. She's also responsible for the Musky Fool name and all the good decisions in my life, at least.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of topics out there in the fly fishing world. We are by no means the experts on any of that stuff. Our guests hopefully will be a lot smarter than we will be, but hence the name Spot Burn. So we want to spot burn basically all these different types of topics. We're not going to give away any fishing locations.
Everything but fishing spots. Sorry, you're going to have to pay for those.
Exactly. So metaphorically, we're going to be spot burning all these different types of topics for everybody, and it's going to just be this amazing knowledge sharing journey that we're all going to go on and share with each other, and hopefully there's some compelling, entertaining content that comes along the way.
Yeah, we hope you like it. And if you don't, I'm sorry in advance.
Yep.
But let's start a little bit by getting into who the heck we are, why we were here. So I want to start with you, Josh. How did I think first and foremost, how did you get the name Bam Bam?
Oh boy. Well, it all stems back to about 2018, I'd say. I think that was the year at Treelands Resort, opening day of the Musky Championship, and hooked into a big old muskie mid-river. And we were reeling her in and just fighting the fish, just really concerned about boating her. And all of a sudden, we didn't realize, but there was
You said boating her or boating her?
boating her.
Boating with a T.
There was no N in there. Maybe there was. But a bear hunting dog swam across the river and got tangled in the muskie and
God
the
damn it.
fly line. And in the midst of all that, the fly rod snapped. And it was crazy. But we landed the bear dog. We landed the muskie. And then the next day, I went on to break another
What
rod.
fights better, a bear dog or a muskie?
I would say both at the same time. It's pretty dang crazy, Dan.
Do you get extra points in that tournament for bear dogs?
You do. We unfortunately didn't bump the bear dog though, so we'll
it
never
doesn't
know
count
how
then.
big it was.
That sucks.
But that muskie was 38 inches, and it was the biggest fish of the first day of the tournament.
Oh, nicely done.
So that was
Nicely
cool.
done. That's like an 8-pointer, I think, or something like that.
Yep. And then Steven Pogodetsky. I don't think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
There's
at
no
all.
way anyone pronounces that. We just call him Pogo.
AKA Pogo. He's the one who coined the nickname Bam Bam because I broke so many fly rods that weekend.
There's just nicknames that seem to fit and stick, and I think that one was like destiny.
Yep.
I don't know if you started breaking more things after it or what, but
I'm just naturally a bull in a china shop, really. So
That's perfect.
It's very fitting. Dan, how about yourself? How'd you get into all of this stuff?
musky fly fishing or what? What, podcasting? I have no idea why I'm here, Josh.
Yeah, let's start with musky fly fishing, and then we'll segue into how did you just come up with the idea of starting Musky Fool?
Okay. I think folks we've been on a few other podcasts. They might have heard the story of Musky Fool. Of course, all good ideas were Jen's. So this is another one. The truth of the matter is I was on the toilet when Jen texted me and said that we should just do this. But how did I get into musky fly fishing? So Uncle and Dad are the two responsible for dragging me along fishing. Don't judge them, but they were walleye fishermen to start out. They know it, so they're not offended, but they weren't great walleye fishermen. I think the first memory is probably just being really cold at night in a shitty boat up on Laura Lake. We're not supposed to spot burn. There's no more walleye left in that lake, but whatever. And I remember, the first memory was I remember us spotlighting muskies. Oh, look at that, while we were attempting to catch walleyes. And then somewhere along the lines, my uncle, I think, was the one that kind of wanted to start musky fishing. And I was less than 10 years old at this point. I was still pretty young. And, conventional musky stuff. We started doing that. We started going northern Wisconsin regularly, got rid of all the walleye shit, focused on muskies, still kind of had no idea what we were doing. Casted at weeds, casted at the shoreline, like all good fishermen do. And it definitely stuck. I think that was the type of fishing I liked the most when I was a kid. Whether it was the big fish or the scary fish, or you got to cast the big cool lures. I mean, that was whoa, this is cool. Fast forward a while. I mean, sports, college, high school, and we were up in Manitowish waters, and I vividly remember seeing someone doing it for the first time. I'm pretty certain that was Bill Shear, because I don't know anybody else in that area with that type of boat, slinging line with socks on the other end. And then, ended up having, that was the first subconscious implant of musky fly fishing. And then maybe it was just because I was such a bad conventional musky fisherman. I was like, there's got to be a way to catch these fish. There's got to be a better way. And ended up, I think there's a couple, a surgery I had to have. If you want the full story, that we'll save for another podcast. But basically, Jen got me a video, and I got hooked tying musky flies first. So my first entrance into musky fly fishing, was tying musky flies
Oh, that's interesting.
in winter.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then that summer it was like, or that was winter, and then next season it was like, no more gear rods in the boat. We're gonna do this with fly rods, and it was hilarious. I mean, it was terrible. It was as bad as you can imagine. But I just like it just clicked. It all clicked. Like that's what I wanted to do. That's how I wanted to fish. I felt like it was like at the time I remember it feeling like no one else knew about it. Clearly that wasn't the case. There have been people musky fly fishing way longer than me, catching muskies on the fly, but I felt like, oh my God, I had a little secret that all of the gear fishermen didn't have. And that kind of like set me off on the path. And then, I mean, it became kind of an outlet of stress. You know, like I was working a lot of hours at a job, and it was anytime it was like, let's go musky fly fishing. Whether it was the chain of lakes in Madison, going up north, northern Wisconsin. And it just as all things snowballed, just kind of kept snowballing. So that's kind of the like longer winded version of like how it really came together. But yeah, and then, you know, fast forward, and then I ended up here. No, but I'd love to hear you talk about the same. I don't know if I've heard your story about how your kind of journey into musky fishing and musky fly fishing.
Yeah, that's a fun story. So I'm kind of an old dude now. I'm almost 40, which is hard to believe. Ooh, I like it. But yeah, my grandparents, they lived in central Montana. My dad was raised there. So we would always go out there every summer just visiting our relatives and visiting the grandparents, and we would definitely be begging to go trout fishing. And that was my first exposure to seeing fly fishing in real life.
How old were you, roughly?
Oh, my first fish I ever caught was a trout, and I was probably 2 or 3.
On a fly rod?
No, on a worm, probably when I was like
Yes.
2 or 3, like a toddler. But just growing up and seeing that and being in this beautiful mountain area, you know, a boy from Wisconsin, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's so surreal. And you see these old guys that are out there slinging fly rods. You're like, I want to do that someday. So I always beg my dad, beg my grandpa, hey, let's get into fly fishing. I think it's really cool. They always said we were too young. So when we were about 10 or 11 years old, my dad said, okay, you read this book and I'll buy you your first fly rod. So we did.
Was the book related to fly fishing, or was this just like...
It was essentially like Learn to Fly Fish for Dummies at the time. So we're talking early 90s here, folks. And so we read the book.
I was just being born.
Yeah, Dan was just being born. We were just in early adolescence there, but we read the book on the drive out to Montana, got our first fly rod, and it took me 2 years to catch my first fish on a fly rod. But once I did, and I cracked the code, I was instantly hooked. I'm like, this is so cool. It's primal. It's a totally different approach than gear fishing. It's a lot more engaging. So I was just absolutely obsessed with fly fishing, and like most people, I thought you can only catch trout with a fly rod, nothing else. But of course, that's not the case. You catch your first smallmouth, you catch your first bluegill.
But in the moment, at that time, it was like the world surrounded trout. Trout fly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, you start getting into the warm water species, and you're like, this is the gateway drug to bigger and more aggressive fish. And then ultimately you accidentally catch your first pike, you catch a muskie on a fly, and it's life-changing. So that's kind of the evolutionary track of my fly fishing career.
I love it. What about, like, when did it become, I mean, I know you, fishing with you, getting to know you over the last few years, like, I consider you, like, a musky fool through and through. When did it, like, click? Like, oh, it's muskies. It's muskies. That's the thing.
Absolute muskies. Well, yeah, I've been fishing my entire life, and I had an uncle that was really into muskie fishing, and he took us out muskie fishing when we were younger, like toddlers and like elementary school, and I always thought it was really cool. Like the thought of catching a fish that was bigger than you when you're 6 or 7 years old it's pretty intimidating. And I just fell in love with that allure, that like the mystique of the muskie. It just gets ingrained in you, and then you actually catch your first one, and it's so surreal. But then, you know, you catch a bunch of those with traditional gear over the years, and you're like, I want to up the ante. What's a different challenge? What's a different approach? And you get exposed to somebody that's pursuing them with a fly rod, and there's nothing better than that. I always tell people it's like the metaphor of, do you go deer hunting with a gun or do you go deer hunting with a bow? The guys that go deer hunting with a gun, they're still harvesting deer, but the guys that are they're hunting with a bow, they put in a ton of time. They're scouting, they're doing food plots, setting up tree stands,
practicing shooting,
all the game cameras. There's another level of commitment, and that's what I really gravitated towards with fly fishing for muskies.
Well, and it's interesting how, like, in Wisconsin, both growing up here, if you really fish, you can't, however you got into it, you cannot avoid muskies. It's like ingrained in our fishing culture, which is a pretty deep fishing culture, but it's the bars, Muskie Joe's, and the resorts, and the roads, and the Muskie Point Resort, and the Tiger Muskie this.
Oh, yeah.
It's always this, like...
Subconsciously, they're just marketing at you wherever you go in Wisconsin. Muskies.
Well, and kind of like this weird, scary, there's all the, like, weird stories about it's going to bite your toe and none of that, but it's like... You kind of end up. That's what I felt like personally was like it was like muskies in Wisconsin and then fly fishing, and it just had to go together.
Yep.
And I feel like so many people, whether it was people that have doing it long before you and I, had that same feeling of like, of course this will work. We're in Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're in our backyard. I mean, we might as well put them at the forefront of what we're pursuing.
Yep. We talk about that a lot here at the shop. I mean, that's why it's called Musky Fool. It's native. It belongs here. I hate to break it to you, but brown trout don't. As much as we like fishing for them too, muskies, the muskie capital of the world. We got two cities that argue about it. Two cities is probably aggressive, more like towns. But I love it. So we're gonna get into a little bit of like background on who the heck we are and why we're here. And I think the easiest way to do that is to start with some rapid fire questions. So basically, Josh, you get one fly to fish for the rest of your life. What are you doing? What do you got?
That is a very easy question for me. It is definitely the double Buford. That's black and orange, tied by Urban Fly Company. Mark Burns out of Pennsylvania.
Love it.
How about you, Dan?
Ooh. That's so tough. I don't know. It's probably just something like with bucktail and feathers that's white and about 8 inches long.
Okay.
I don't, it doesn't even have to do a whole lot. I don't have a specific pattern in mind, but if you put me to the screws and you said this is it.
So you're like an El Natural approach guy.
I just
like
white. Yeah.
White?
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with white in any body of water.
No.
Which I'm sure we'll touch base on in future episodes.
Yeah,
color
I can see
theory
it.
And all
I
that
like
weird
it.
Stuff.
Yep. No, I agree. What else we got? What's your go-to setup? What are you really fishing in terms of gear?
Well, go-to setup is a Chippewa River custom rod in the 12 weight variation.
Do you have Bam Bam? Do you have like a special warranty policy with Tom, or is it?
Yeah, basically, if the rod gets through a season without breaking, he puts it into the Fishing Hall of Fame. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But it's a one-piece 12-weight by Tom. He makes the really good sticks. And for the money you pay for them, there's no better value. And then other than that, it's really big lines because I love seeing that rod load up. It's got a ton of power. It's super lightweight. And it can handle a lot of line. Like we're talking 600-700 grain line. So that's pretty much my go-to setup as far as leaders go. Standard butt section, whatever you fancy, and then a little bit of a wire bite guard. And then I'm not really into the glider game as much as some of these guys are. I'm more of a double Buford type of guy.
It works for you.
Yep. So that's kind of that's my go-to setup. Dan,
I was just gonna say, if you haven't watched, we'll hopefully be able to show some of it. But if you haven't, I know it's out there on like Musky Country Lessons, and if you haven't watched Josh sling a 12 weight before, it is a sight to behold. He's a sniper. It's kind of what's in my head is like when I'm picturing someone musky fly fish, it's smooth. It's you got it going on over there, buddy.
I got the sauce. I
You
learned
got the
from the
sauce.
best. I'll say that.
There you go.
Dan, how about you? What's your go-to setup?
Well,
These days.
I remember when my first setup was like some Cabela's crap. But I remember when that G Loomis musky rod came out, and I was just like, oh, it's a musky rod. Let's try it. And it stuck. I love it. I fished the 11 weight and 12 weight. Probably would pick the 12 weight over anything else. I like a little bit deeper line that Cortland Sync 4 has been kind of the go-to lately. Not really overlining at 500 grain, similar to you, standard leader setup, butt section, fluorocarbon, 50-pound wire with that white fly at the end. But I will say, you were here for when it arrived, and we'll talk more about this one later. You'll hear more about it at the shop. We just got a set of RB Miser, two-handed, custom-made, for Musky Fool musky rods. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to fish them because they're so goddamn pretty, but those things might become the new... They look pretty sweet. You got to see one today.
Oh, they are little works of art.
Yeah, they are. A little jungle cock in there.
Yep.
Nothing like a little jungle cock to get you excited.
Dan just wanted to say that.
3 times jungle cock. There you go. So those are, what else we got? Well, I want to hear a little bit more. I want to get to another one of these rapid fire questions, but I want to hear, you got the Bam Bam vibe. You got, I think a lot of people know that you're musky dude. You got the Bam Bam Fly Guy company, but what's the other part? What's the backstory of Josh? You do a little bit more than break Chippewa River rods and musky fish, I assume.
That's true. I'm kind of the Swiss Army knife of all sorts of things, but in the last decade, I've co-owned and operated a graphic design and web development agency out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So we've had a lot of fun doing that, and it's been just an absolute blast over the years, just kind of merging my passion with fishing and design and all of those things and putting it together just to have all sorts of fun and just to enhance everyone's lives and meet tons of new people. I've met so many people through social media. That's basically why we're here. We met through social media. And then like even fishing Beast of the East last year, I met all those guys through social media. So it's just been a fun world to live and play in that regard. I know he's being a pretty humble dude, but Josh is, he's an entrepreneur. He is, I think graphic design for the plebes out there that some people are like, oh, so you do logos, but Josh is like, I think the Swiss Army knife is pretty accurate. He, a lot about a lot of things, and it's been really fun getting to work with you too, not just fishing together. Well, thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, of course.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Dan, right back at you. What's your background? People probably are wondering, who is this Dan Donovan? Who is this Jen Donovan? How do they know how to run a business? How do they know how to start such a crazy, awesome business in the midst of a pandemic? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So we're coming to you from Wanakee, which is on the north side of Madison. Jen and I have been up in Madison. We actually are high school sweethearts, believe it or not. Yeah, we met. We started dating each other sophomore year in high school, and we came up to University of Wisconsin together. And then ultimately kind of got into business. I think I was graduated from a business school. I was kind of the major, for what it's worth, was finance and investment securities, which was just basically learning how to trade stocks, which was pretty much a whole waste of time.
I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel you.
And I kind of got hooked up with a few different healthcare technology startups. And really that's where I cut my teeth on business. And I think I really liked it. I had my grandpa, who was a big influence on me. He was, owned his own business as long as I was alive. So that was always like in my head is like, that was cool. Just having your own thing and building your own schedule. Mm-hmm. And I think really like competition of business I liked. I played sports growing up, and I think that was like as an adult one of those ways to keep competing in a healthy way that puts food on your table, and you got to make a living and all that crap. But that was really what got me into business. Had a lot of fun with a lot of amazing smart people, building a couple healthcare companies in Madison. And then, to fast forward a little bit, the pandemic hit. And I think the pandemic definitely changed my perspective on those businesses and my path forward and all that stuff. To the point where I think Jen and I felt like it was time for us to dive in. And even though I was working at startups, I was still working for someone, awesome people kind of who took the leap on their own to start a company. And, we'll probably get into that a little bit more later, but we felt like we found a little bit of a niche in terms of what wasn't being offered in the Midwest, wasn't being offered for all these crazy musky people out there. And that's what really led us to kick this into high gear. It's kind of hilarious looking back on it now because like the pictures Jen, I think, shared one with me the other day of me in the basement tying flies and like, oh man, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we had no idea. I would love to hear you. I know I've heard a little bit, but when we launched Musky Fool, I would love to hear your perspective on it because you had been musky fishing for a while when that came out.
Man, well, anyone who's ever attempted to run a business, ignorance is definitely bliss when you're
so much better.
When you're first getting going because you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. So cautionary tale right there.
For sure.
If you're thinking about ever starting a business. But anywho, yeah, the first time I saw the Musky Fool logo or any talk about Musky Fool, I was like, who the fuck are these idiots? Especially in the middle of a pandemic. I couldn't believe it. What are they doing? There's so many other people that have done this before you guys.
For sure.
There's been a lot of people that have been fly fishing for muskies a lot longer than we have. But they just came out guns a-blazing. We're Musky Fool. The original musky fly shop. And, they took the world by storm. And, we were all a little bit skeptical, a little bit on the fence about it. But over time...
Who are these fucking guys?
They proved everybody wrong. They're incredibly intelligent human beings, very, very gracious, the kindest people on the planet, and their customer service is just fantastic. You guys can't disagree with any of that. And I'm not just saying it because I'm sitting here, but it's an absolute amazing business, and I just love being a part of it all.
Well, we love it too, man, and we love, I think we're at the point where like you've put your own mark on it, and it's been so fun working together. But we do love it. I think like, those cliches of do something you love and it won't feel like work. Oh man, I think I probably would have laughed at that if somebody would have told me that, 4 years ago. And now it feels like, it feels like you never burn out. You just keep going. You love it. We have amazing customers. We've been able to turn it into something from our basement into Madison's only fly shop. The only fly shop for sure that has muskies in the bathroom, muskies on the front door, big old musky sign on the side of the building. We do more than just muskies, but I think we definitely love it. Which kind of gets me into moving into like the next part of what we want to talk about, which was really the podcast. I think that's a good background on Josh and I, probably longer than you guys cared for. So good thing there's a 30-second fast forward on your podcast app.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us this long if you're still here.
If you're still here through 30 minutes of the first episode, we thank you. Hopefully you haven't run for the hills. But, what did we really, I think where this all came together, last month, we were in the midst of trade show season, and I think we've been chewing on this for a while. We did Musky Fool Live. You've had a little dabbling in podcasts, and ultimately, like you just said, the customers are really the folks that we get to talk to are the ones that was like, when's it coming back? Where's Musky Fool Live? I loved it.
Yep.
And that's what really kept it going. And then thanks to Bam Bam himself, we built this cool set in the dungeon. It looks so much better than what I get to see. I look out at the basement. You guys get to see this. Oh man, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. It's a different thing. But yeah. So what are we doing here? You talked a little bit about the name, spot burning everything but fishing spots. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be a magical journey where we are going to outline all these different topics that we want to address in the industry. And like I said
Just
earlier,
muskies? What are we just?
all sorts of stuff.
Good.
Yeah, we're going to cover cold water species, warm water species. Maybe someday we'll dabble into some saltwater species. But all things. I mean, what are some of the weird concepts and ideas we've talked about are like how to take care of yourself while fly fishing. You know, we take it for granted that our rotator cuffs are always in good working order and we don't have trigger finger and this and that. Some of us don't, at least.
Fuck. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, I got fucking injured musky fly fishing. It ain't for the faint of heart.
Poor Dano. Yeah, but there's so much to delve into. It's like how to winterize a boat.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thinks they know how to do it, but do you truly know how to do it?
You just put it in your garage in winter, and then it's winterized, right?
Yep,
Perfect.
exactly.
Then I did it right.
You know, muskies, where they came from, you know, and where are we now?
Yeah, and I think what's cool about it is Josh and I, we have different perspectives on this, but we kind of are going to try and meld them together. I've always been, especially since I got way deeper into fishing, fascinated with the history of it, the culture of it in Wisconsin. You know, the stories. It's like a little bit of myth and like the mythological, this like beast of muskies and all of how did trout get here and all these different angles. Mm-hmm. So hopefully, you know, you're not just going to hear us ramble on. This is probably the most rambling we'll do, but we do plan to get pretty deep into things. I think that's where the name came from. Deep dives and also topics that might get us in a little bit of trouble. We're not going to shy away from some of the hard stuff.
Yep.
There's a lot of that in fishing.
Ask some hard questions.
Yeah.
Investigative reporting, deep dives into some weird topics and whatnot. And then we are going to do some, you know, lighter pieces that are how-tos and things like that. So it's going to be a little bit well-rounded and yeah, we live in a really tremendous state. The longer we fish in the state, the more we realize, holy cow, we got more spring creeks than anywhere in the world. You know, we are at the epicenter of everything.
And it's, again, like part of the culture of Wisconsin. It's just deep fishing. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, whether it's muskies or walleye or trout or, you know, you name it, smallmouth bass. So, we definitely plan to do a little bit of that. And we also are going to interview some cool people because God forbid you have to listen to Josh and I the whole time and stare at us. We hope to bring in some actual experts, some crazy characters. There's a lot of them in fly fishing.
Oh, yeah.
And not even maybe just fly fishing. There's we'll infuse a little bit of I think as fly anglers we can get a little one-dimensional and think the world revolves around fly line and flies. And I hate to admit it, folks, but there's a lot more gear anglers catching a lot more fish out there than all of us. So we can learn from them.
We probably will have a lot of gear guys on our show. Ultimately.
Just to make fun of them, or maybe ask them. No, we won't do that.
Both.
I'm sorry.
We're gonna poke the bear for sure.
Couple sucker
it's always
fishermen.
fun to poke the bear.
Yeah, I like fishing suckers. That's probably the one fly I want the most. Live sucker.
The live sucker.
God,
a little bit of bucktail tied
so
on.
good. What else we got?
What else do we
I
got?
think we're also, not going to try and take ourselves too seriously as much as we are going to dive into some topics. I think we're going to try and keep it pretty lighthearted. And then, at the end of the day, this is a group effort. We expect all of you guys to help us with this. What do you want to hear? Who do you want to hear from? What do you not want to hear? So that's, if you go to our website, if you reach out to us on Instagram or social media, Facebook, whatever it may be, help make this the podcast you want to hear in terms of topics and all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that's probably, in an effort to not keep rambling, that's probably like we hit on the core who we are, what we're here for, what we're doing. And, just to reemphasize, as we wrap up, please reach out. Tell us if you hate it. Tell us if you love it. Tell us what you want to hear. Comment, and then, of course, subscribe and share. We really appreciate it. We're very grateful for all the support. We're living the dream, and we love it, and you guys are the ones making it possible. So thank you. You got anything else, Bam Bam?
I think that's it. We
Hell
covered a lot
yeah.
of good stuff in this episode.
First episode in the books. Let's go.
Here we go.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. We'll be back. Thank you for listening to the Spot Burn Podcast. Coming to you from the dungeon, this podcast is presented by Musky Fool Fly Fishing Co. We want to thank our awesome sponsors, Cortland Line Company and Stealth Craft Boats. We also want to thank all of you, our listeners, for tuning in, subscribing, sharing, and spreading the good word. If you haven't heard, go check us out at muskyfool.com. Have fun out there on the water, y'all.